The crisp autumn air carried the scent of pine and damp earth, a familiar perfume of the countryside where my sister, Catherine, had chosen to get married. The venue was a sprawling old manor with ivy climbing its stone walls and gardens that looked like they'd been plucked from a storybook. Everything was perfect, meticulously planned to the last detail, just as Catherine had always been. Perfection was her brand, and her wedding was set to be her masterpiece. I smoothed the lapels of my navy blue dress and glanced at my daughter, Lily, who was looking out the car window with wide, curious eyes. "It's like a castle, Mom," she whispered, her voice filled with the pure, unadulterated wonder only a 10-year-old can possess. "It is, isn't it?" I smiled, my heart swelling with a fierce, protective love. My Lily. She was the sun in my universe, a bright, inquisitive soul with a smile that could disarm armies. She had my wavy brown hair but her father's deep green eyes, and on her left cheek there was a small, crescent-shaped birthmark, the color of a faded rose. I called it her moon mark. I'd kissed it every night since the day she was born, telling her it was a special map left by an angel. She was beautiful, not in a conventional polished way that my sister's world demanded, but in a real, radiant way that came from her kindness and her spirit. As we stepped out of the car, the gentle crunch of gravel under our heels, I felt a familiar knot of anxiety tighten in my stomach. Family gatherings, especially ones orchestrated by Catherine, were always a delicate dance. My sister and I were two sides of a different coin. I had found my peace in a quiet life, in the simple joys of motherhood and my work as a librarian. Catherine, a successful art director, thrived in the spotlight, curating a life that was as aesthetically pleasing as her portfolio. She loved me, I knew, but she also saw me as a project she could never quite fix. A little too plain, a little too quiet, a little too ordinary. We were greeted by a flurry of ushers in smart tuxedos. Inside, the great hall was breathtaking. Sunlight streamed through tall, arched windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air like tiny fairies. Guests in their finest attire mingled, their laughter echoing against the high, vaulted ceilings. Catherine was a vision in her white gown, a statuesque queen in her castle, greeting everyone with a brilliant, practiced smile. When she saw us, she glided over, her smile tightening just a fraction as her eyes scanned our attire. "Eleanor, you made it," she said, her voice a little too bright. "And Lily, don't you look sweet?" She patted Lily's head, a gesture that looked more like an inspection than an affection. I saw Lily's small smile falter for a second. Catherine's gaze lingered for a moment on Lily's cheek, on her moon mark, and I saw a flicker of something in her eyes, a tiny, almost imperceptible wince. It was the same look I'd seen 100 times before, a look that said, "If only that weren't there." I squeezed Lily's hand, a silent message of reassurance passing between us. "The place is beautiful, Kat," I said, genuinely impressed. "You've outdone yourself." "It's acceptable," she replied with a little shrug, as if to downplay the monumental effort it had clearly taken. "Now, the photographer is gathering the family for portraits on the west lawn before the ceremony begins. We need to hurry. These pictures are crucial, Eleanor. They're for the feature." Of course, there was a feature. A prominent bridal magazine was covering the event. This wasn't just a wedding. It was a production. As she turned to marshal other family members, I felt that knot in my stomach pull tighter. The pictures. The moment I had been subconsciously dreading had arrived. The west lawn was a carpet of perfectly manicured green, bordered by rose bushes bursting with crimson and ivory blooms. In the distance, a gentle hill rolled towards a line of ancient oak trees, their leaves just beginning to turn golden. It was a painter's dream, and the photographer, a wiry man with a permanently stressed expression, was buzzing around his equipment like a frantic bee. Catherine was right beside him, pointing and directing, her voice sharp and clear, cutting through the polite murmurs of the family. "Uncle Robert, you're casting a shadow on Aunt Marie. Step back." "No, not that far back," she commanded. My relatives shuffled into place, their smiles looking more strained with each passing moment. This was not a family portrait. It was a human diorama, and Catherine was the exacting curator. Lily and I were positioned on the edge of the group. I held her hand, its smallness a comfort in the midst of the rising tension. "Just smile, baby," I whispered, trying to project a calm I did not feel. She looked up at me and gave a genuine, heart-melting smile that was all her own. It was a flash of pure sunlight in a room full of artificial light. For a moment, my anxiety vanished. We were here for Catherine, yes, but we were here together. That's what mattered. The photographer, whose name was Julian, took a few test shots, peering at the tiny screen on his camera with a critical frown. "Okay, people, big smiles. Look like you're happy to be here," he chirped, the command sounding more like a threat. He took a volley of shots, the shutter clicking like a rapid heartbeat. Then he stopped. He blew out a frustrated puff of air and zoomed in on his camera's display. He looked up, his eyes scanning our faces, and they landed on Lily. My stomach plummeted. I knew that look. It was a look of assessment, of calculation, of finding a flaw in the composition. "Right," he said, addressing no one in particular and yet everyone at once. "For the next series of shots, for the main feature, can we have the little girl just step aside for a bit?" The world went quiet. The chirping of birds, the rustle of leaves, the distant hum of traffic, it all faded into a dull, roaring silence in my ears. He hadn't looked at me, but at Catherine, as if seeking her permission to remove the unwanted element. "Why?" I asked, my voice dangerously level. The photographer finally turned to me, flustered. "It's just the light. It's catching her cheek it's creating a distraction. We need a cleaner shot. A distraction." He had called my daughter's face, her beautiful, unique face, a distraction. I felt a cold rage begin to build inside me, a glacial fire. I looked at Catherine, my eyes pleading with her. "Say something. Defend your niece. Be a sister, be an aunt, be a human being." Catherine met my gaze, but there was no support there, only exasperation. She forced a brittle smile. "Eleanor, please don't make a scene. It's just for a few pictures for the magazine. They want it to be perfect." Perfection. That word again. A word that had haunted the edges of my life, a standard I could never meet and had stopped trying to. But now it was being used as a weapon against my child. I looked down at Lily. Her wide, green eyes were fixed on me, shimmering with tears she was fighting to hold back. Her lower lip trembled. She understood. She might not have known the word distraction, but she understood the meaning of being pushed aside, of being told she was not good enough. The beautiful castle had become a dungeon, and the fairy tale, a nightmare. In that instant, a lifetime of feeling secondary, of being quietly judged by my sister, crystallized into a single, unshakable resolution. This was not about me anymore. It was about the little girl whose hand I held, the girl who deserved to believe she was a map left by an angel, not a flaw in a photograph. I straightened my back, looking past the photographer, past my stunned family members, and directly at my sister. "No," I said. The word was quiet, but it echoed across the lawn with the force of a thunderclap. I didn't wait for a response. I bent down and squeezed Lily's hand. "Come on, sweetheart," I said softly, my voice only for her. "We're leaving." And together, we turned our backs on the perfect lawn, the perfect roses, and the perfect family portrait. We walked away, hand in hand, leaving a gaping hole in their flawless picture. The walk back to the car was the longest I had ever taken. It felt as though we were traversing a vast, empty desert, though it was only a few hundred feet of gravel path. Behind us, a stunned silence lingered, a vacuum where Catherine's sharp commands used to be. I didn't dare look back. I didn't need to see the mixture of shock, disapproval, and perhaps even a little relief on the faces of my family. My focus was singular, the small hand held firmly in mine. Lily was silent, her steps quick and measured to keep up with my determined stride. Her body was rigid with the effort of holding herself together. I could feel the tremors of her suppressed sobs traveling up her arm. The sound of our shoes crunching on the gravel was a stark, lonely rhythm against the backdrop of the elegant manor we were leaving behind. The storybook castle now seemed menacing, its beautiful facade hiding a cold and hollow heart. We reached the car, and I clicked the unlock button. The sound was unnaturally loud in the quiet parking area. I opened the passenger door for Lily, and she slid inside, still completely silent. As I walked around to the driver's side, I finally risked a glance back. The family group was still standing on the lawn, a confused cluster of formal wear. I could see Catherine, a flash of white, her hands on her hips, her posture radiating fury. Our departure hadn't just been a refusal. It was a disruption of her perfect narrative, and for that, I knew I would not be easily forgiven. A part of me, the part that had always craved her approval, ached. But a much larger part, the mother, felt a surge of defiant pride. I got into the driver's seat and closed the door, encasing us in our own private world. The silence inside was thick and heavy. I turned the key in the ignition, and the engine rumbled to life. Before I could put the car in reverse, the dam within Lily finally broke. A gut-wrenching sob escaped her, and she crumpled in her seat, burying her face in her hands. The sound was pure anguish, and it shattered my heart into a million pieces. I immediately turned off the engine, unbuckled my seatbelt, and pulled her into my arms. She clung to me, her small body shaking with the force of her weeping. "He didn't want me in the picture," she cried, her voice muffled against my shoulder. "He said I was a distraction. Am I ugly, Mom?" I held her tighter, stroking her hair, my own tears welling up, hot and angry. "Oh, my love. No, no, no," I whispered fiercely into her hair. "You listen to me. You are not a distraction. You are the most important person in any room you enter. You are bright, and you are kind, and you are so incredibly beautiful. Do you hear me? So beautiful." I pulled back so I could look her in the eyes, my hands cupping her tear-stained face. I used my thumb to gently trace the outline of her birthmark, her perfect moon mark. "This," I said, my voice thick with emotion, "is not a flaw. This is a piece of you. It's a part of your story. It's as beautiful as your green eyes and your amazing smile. That man, and anyone who agrees with him, is blind. They are looking for a boring kind of perfection that doesn't really exist. It's like wanting every flower in a garden to be the exact same shape and color. How boring would that be? You, my lily, are a wildflower. You're unique and you're stunning, and you belong exactly as you are." She sniffled, looking at me, her green eyes searching mine for the truth. "But Aunt Catherine?" She agreed with him. The simple, painful truth of it hung in the air between us. I couldn't lie to her. "Yes, she did," I admitted softly. "And she was wrong. Terribly, terribly wrong." Sometimes, people get so caught up in what they think things should look like, they forget to see the beauty that's right in front of them. What we did, by walking away, was to say that we don't accept that. We don't let anyone make us feel small or unworthy. Our dignity is more important than any picture. I watched as a flicker of understanding dawned in her eyes. She was still hurt, but the deep, soul-crushing shame was beginning to recede, replaced by something else. A little spark of the defiance I felt. She leaned her head against my chest again, and we sat like that for a few minutes, just breathing together as the engine ticked and cooled. Finally, she whispered, "Okay, Mom." I kissed the top of her head, a wave of love so powerful it almost knocked the wind out of me. "Okay, baby," I replied. I started the car again, and this time, I put it in reverse. As we pulled out of the long, winding driveway, I didn't look at the manor in the rearview mirror. I looked at the brave, wonderful child sitting beside me. We had walked out of a wedding, but we were walking towards something far more important, ourselves. The journey home was cloaked in a strange, fragile tranquility. The storm of tears had passed, leaving behind a sky that was calm but still tender. I had turned on the radio to a classical station, and a soft, melancholic piano piece filled the space between us, a soundtrack that seemed to understand our mood without needing words. Lily didn't retreat back into her shell of hurt. Instead, she sat with her head resting against the cool glass of the window, her breath fogging a small circle on the pane. She watched the world blur by, trees, houses, other cars, her expression profoundly thoughtful. The initial searing shock had worn off, and now, in the safety of our moving sanctuary, she was processing. I risked a glance at her. The tears were gone, but her eyes held a new kind of wisdom, the kind a child only gains after a painful brush with the world's casual cruelty. My heart ached for her lost innocence, but it also swelled with pride for her quiet strength. "Mom," she said after a long silence, her voice quiet but steady, "will Aunt Catherine be mad at us forever?" I let out a slow breath, my hands tightening on the steering wheel. "Oh, honey, I think she will be very mad for a while, yes. It's hard for her when things don't go the way she planned." I chose my next words carefully, wanting to be honest but not bitter. Family is complicated, sweetheart. Sometimes the people we love hurt us the most. Not because they are evil, but because they are trapped in their own worlds, their own fears. "She's afraid of my cheek?" The question was so direct, so innocent. It was like a tiny, perfect arrow to the heart of the matter. "I think," I said softly, "your Aunt Catherine is afraid of anything that isn't perfect in her eyes. Her idea of perfect is very narrow and, honestly, very boring. It's like a room where every piece of furniture is the same color and shape, and because she's so busy trying to keep everything matching, she misses out on all the things that are truly beautiful and interesting, like your moon mark." That seemed to satisfy her. She was quiet for a few more miles, and then she said something that showed me the incredible, resilient core of her spirit. Well, I don't want to be in her boring magazine anyway. It probably has no pictures of cats in it. I laughed. A real, genuine laugh that felt like a release of all the tension I'd been holding. It broke the spell of sadness. You're probably right. It's a huge oversight on their part. And me neither, baby. Me neither. We were about 10 minutes from home when my phone, which had been sitting silently in the cup holder, buzzed violently to life. The screen lit up with Catherine's name. My entire body went rigid. I could picture her perfectly. Having delegated the photo session to a flustered assistant, now pacing the Manor's manicured lawns, her fury having found its target. I pressed the red button to decline the call, my thumb decisive. A moment later, it rang again, more insistent this time. I declined it again. A flurry of text messages followed immediately. My phone buzzed and buzzed, a swarm of angry digital bees trying to break into our quiet space. Lily glanced at the phone, then at me. I picked it up. Where are you going? The 2 question marks felt like accusations. You can't just leave. You are ruining the entire day. Answer your phone, Eleanor. This is not about you. Another message, this one from my mother. Catherine is devastated. Your sister is in tears. You need to come back and apologize to her and the photographer right now. Then Catherine again. You have embarrassed me in front of my new husband, his family, and everyone who matters. How could you be so incredibly selfish? That last word, selfish, was the one that broke through my composure. It felt like a slap. I gasped, a sharp intake of breath, and my hand started to shake. Selfish. The absolute, breathtaking irony of it. I had spent a lifetime making myself smaller, quieter, more accommodating to fit into the spaces she allowed for me. The one time, I chose to shield my daughter's spirit from being crushed. I was the selfish one. The car swerved slightly. Mom, are you okay? Lily asked, her small hand reaching out to touch my arm. Her touch grounded me. I pulled the car over to the side of the road, the gravel crunching under the tires. I took a deep, shuddering breath. I'm okay, sweetheart. Just angry. I looked at her worried face, and my resolve hardened from a liquid fire into unbreakable steel. I picked up the phone. My fingers flew over the keyboard as I typed a single, simple reply to Catherine's tirade. I am with my daughter, and she is perfect. I pressed send. Then, without a moment's hesitation, I opened Catherine's contact and pressed block. A wave of both liberation and profound sadness washed over me. I navigated to my mother's contact and did the same. I knew this was a temporary measure, a digital dam against the flood that was surely coming. But for tonight, it was enough. Tonight was for healing. When we finally pulled into our own driveway, the sight of our small, unassuming house felt like a physical embrace. Here, there were no expectations of grandeur. There was just the comfort of the familiar, the slightly crooked porch step, the crayon drawing of a rainbow taped to the front window, the faint, welcoming smell of old paper and cinnamon that clung to everything. This was our castle, and its walls were built of love, not stone. Instead of changing out of her fancy dress, Lily kicked off her shiny shoes and curled up on the sofa with our fluffy gray cat, Apollo, who immediately began to purr like a tiny, contented engine. Can we order pizza? She asked, her voice already sounding lighter, younger. The big one with everything on it? We can order 2, I declared, pulling a crumpled menu from a kitchen drawer as if it were a royal decree. As we waited for our feast, I sat on the floor by the sofa. Lily looked down at me, her head propped on a cushion. It still hurts a little, she admitted softly. What he said. I know it does, honey, I said, my voice gentle. Words can be like little stones. Even when you know they're wrong, they can leave a bruise, but bruises heal. And you know what the truth is, don't you? She nodded and used her own finger to trace her birthmark. A map, she whispered. Left by an angel. That's right, I affirmed, my heart aching with love for her. And it will always lead you to wonderful, kind, and interesting places, and away from the boring, perfect ones. That evening, we didn't speak of the wedding again. We ate pizza straight from the box, watched a silly animated movie about talking animals on an adventure, and eventually fell asleep on the sofa, with Apollo purring between us. Just before I drifted off, I looked at Lily's peaceful face, illuminated by the soft, shifting colors from the television. Her cheek was turned towards me, the crescent shape of her birthmark a gentle shadow in the dim light. It wasn't a flaw. It wasn't a distraction. It was a signature. A unique and beautiful mark of the incredible person she was and was destined to become. In the quiet of our home, Surrounded by a love that needed no filter and no feature in a glossy magazine, we had found our own kind of perfection. The week that followed was one of profound and deliberate peace. My phone remained silent, a testament to the digital walls I had built. We fell into a gentle routine. We visited the library, we baked cookies that were more misshapen than perfect. We spent hours in our small, overgrown garden, identifying insects and pulling up weeds. I watched Lily closely, searching for any lingering shadows of that day on the lawn. But I found none. If anything, she seemed more herself than ever. She would catch her reflection in a window, and instead of turning away, she would trace her moon mark with a sort of quiet ownership. My act of leaving had been a statement, and she had heard it loud and clear. You are worthy. You are non-negotiable. The peace was broken a week later, on a Saturday afternoon. We were in the garden, and I was showing Lily how to repot a struggling lavender plant. A sleek, unfamiliar car pulled up to the curb. My heart seized when Catherine emerged from the driver's side. She was not in a wedding dress, but in sharp, tailored trousers and a silk blouse. Her armor for the everyday world. She stood on the pavement for a long moment, looking at our little house, her expression unreadable. "Lily, sweetheart," I said softly, my eyes fixed on my sister. "Why don't you go inside and get us some lemonade?" Lily looked from me to Catherine and back again. She understood. With a small, serious nod, she put down her trowel and went inside, the screen door closing gently behind her. I stood up, brushing the dirt from my knees. I did not walk to the gate. I waited. Catherine eventually made her way up the path, her expensive heels sinking slightly into the soft grass. She stopped a few feet from me. Her face was a mask of strained composure. "You blocked me," she said. It wasn't a question. "I did," I replied, my voice even. "I needed to." "I came to get the wedding gift," she said, her voice clipped. It was a beautiful, hand-painted ceramic bowl I'd commissioned from a local artist. A peace offering, I had thought at the time. "It's inside," I said. "I'll get it for you." As I turned to go, she spoke again, her voice finally cracking. "Is that it, Eleanor? You walk out of my wedding, you humiliate me, you ruin the most important day of my life, and you have nothing to say?" I stopped and turned back to face her fully. The anger I had felt in the car had cooled into something solid and immovable. "What would you like me to say, Catherine? That I'm sorry?" "I'm not. I am sorry that your wedding day was disrupted. But I am not sorry that I chose my daughter's dignity over your photographs." "Dignity? It was a picture. A single picture for a magazine," she shot back, her voice rising. "Do you have any idea what that day cost? What that photographer cost? He was the best. I wanted the best." "And his best work involved telling a 10-year-old child that her face was a distraction," I said, my voice dropping. "He called her ugly, Kat. Let's not hide behind soft words. He looked at your niece, my daughter, and found her unworthy of being in your perfect picture. And you stood there and you agreed with him." Tears welled in her eyes, tears of frustration and rage. I didn't know what to do. Everything was happening so fast. The schedule, the light, everything had to be perfect. "She is not an everything," I said, stepping closer. "She is a person. She is your niece." The pictures would have been printed, looked at, and put in a drawer. The magazine would have ended up in the recycling bin. But the memory of her aunt watching while a stranger called her ugly, that would have stayed with her for the rest of her life. It would have become a part of her, a little crack in her foundation. I chose to protect the foundation, not the photograph. And I would make that choice again, every single time. I saw something in her shift. The righteous anger faltered, replaced by a flicker of genuine pain. She finally saw past the ruined schedule and the canceled magazine feature. She saw the little girl. I never wanted to hurt her," she whispered, her gaze falling to the ground. "I just wanted everything to be beautiful." "I know," I said, and my own anger softened into a familiar, weary sadness. "But you have to see, Kat. Your definition of beautiful is too small. It doesn't leave room for real people, for moon marks or crooked smiles, or all the messy, imperfect things that make us who we are." The screen door creaked open. Lily stood there, holding a tray with 2 glasses of lemonade, her face a perfect portrait of quiet concern. She walked carefully across the lawn and offered the tray to Catherine. My sister stared at her, truly seeing her for the first time that day. She saw not a flaw in a composition, but her niece offering her a drink on a sunny afternoon. Catherine's composure finally broke. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. She reached out a slightly trembling hand, but not for the lemonade. She gently, hesitantly touched Lily's cheek. "I am so sorry, Lily," she said, her voice thick. What I let happen, it was wrong. Your cheek, it's beautiful. You are beautiful. Lily looked at me and I gave her a small nod. She then looked back at her aunt and gave her a small, shy smile. It was a beginning. Catherine didn't stay long. I retrieved the gift, and we exchanged a few more quiet words. The chasm between us was still there, but a fragile bridge was being built across it. As she drove away, I knew things would never be the same. They would be more honest. That evening, as I tucked Lily into bed, I kissed her cheek, right on her moon mark. She looked up at me, her green eyes clear and bright. Aunt Catherine was sad, she said. Yes, I think she was, I replied. But she knows I'm not a distraction now. Yes, my love, I said, my heart full. She knows. In a world that is so often telling us to be perfect, to fit into a mold, the bravest thing we can do is to love ourselves and each other exactly as we are. To stand up and say that our worth is not measured by our appearance in a photograph, but by the love we give and the dignity we command. Sometimes the most powerful statement is not to argue or to fight, but to simply take the hand of someone you love and walk away from anything that seeks to make you feel small. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs a message of hope.